Ever since my daughter was in middle school, she gave me the nickname Podge. And ever since then, that's what my daughter calls me, that's what all of her friends call me. We were always super close, and I was really worried when she was going off to college that maybe we'd grow apart a little bit more. So I just sort of racked my brain, what could I do to try to stay as connected to her as possible? So I came up with the idea that every Sunday, I would record a 5-minute episode about the kind of topics we might normally talk about, send it to her Monday morning, and then she could watch it on her way to campus. I thought it'd be a good idea to resurrect that. They'll be the kinds of topics that I would talk to my now 25-year-old daughter, or the younger version of myself, or people that I mentor, or maybe you. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Podge. So this week's episode is going to be about Bitcoin. Last week I talked about a bunch of disruptors that I see coming, AI being the big one. That's sort of right in the thick of things right now. But I feel like I had to double back on Bitcoin only because I feel like people really are just not grasping what this opportunity, how much of a sort of once in a lifetime opportunity this kind of thing is. So let me preface this by saying, not a financial advisor, don't take financial advice from me, but I'm going to give you my thoughts about Bitcoin specifically. When you really think about any kind of disruptor, you want to, that's at the stage of maturity that Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin launched in 2009, so it's been mainstream for about 5 or 6 years. So it's on that just right part of the maturity curve. People don't realize that less than 10% of Americans have over $1,000 in Bitcoin. I use that $1,000 threshold, not 1,000 Bitcoin, but $1,000 in Bitcoin. Because if you have less than $1,000 in Bitcoin, you're not really in Bitcoin. So it's less than 10% of the U.S. population has even $1,000 in Bitcoin. And when you look worldwide, it's closer to half of 1%. Tesla has, I think, 10 billion in Bitcoin. MicroStrategy's over 50 billion. But then you look at some of the, not just the Bitcoin maximalists, like people like that, but Fidelity's got 21 billion. Goldman Sachs has 1.6 billion. And believe it or not, BlackRock, and where BlackRock goes, so does a lot of other things, $65 billion in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not going anywhere. There's a limited supply, so there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin that are ever created. And about 95% of all the Bitcoin that will ever be created has already been created. There'll be about another 4% that'll be generated between now and the end of the decade. So I think mid-2030, 99% of the Bitcoin, so effectively, for all intents and purposes, all of the Bitcoin will have been mined. Technically, it will take another 100 years to actually mine that last 1%. But for all intents and purposes, from a supply and demand standpoint, at 99%, all the Bitcoin has effectively been mined. This next 5-year window is probably the greatest sort of growth opportunity on a percentage and both nominal and percentage basis, for the rest of Bitcoin's history. And you have to understand that effectively what's happening with Bitcoin, and to not get into too much of the technical aspects of it, when you have your money in Bitcoin and you self-custody, meaning you control what they call the seed phrase, it's basically effectively a super long password to access your Bitcoin, you're the only one that has control over that. You effectively are acting like your own bank. So coming up here, I would say it's already true, but it's going to become even more true here in the next 12 to 24 months. It's going to become easier and easier to borrow money against your Bitcoin holdings. And allow you to do so in a very low interest rate kind of standpoint. So credit cards are at 25%. I think Bitcoin loans are already something closer to like 12%, so like a little bit less than half of what you're paying on a credit card. And that number is only going to continue to come down. So, imagine that you're able to effectively borrow at, somewhere in the sort of 8 to 12% range, and you're averaging something like a 40 to 50% annual return on your Bitcoin holdings. If I had a kid today, all I would do is basically put 20 grand in Bitcoin, and then look at it when the kid's around 16, getting ready to apply to colleges, and you'll have your college more than covered, maybe your retirement as well. So, I really want to encourage people to, if there's anything that you could add to your talent stack today, other than AI skills, which is I probably would put first in line, it's becoming knowledgeable about Bitcoin and some of the other Bitcoin investment instruments like MicroStrategies, things like that, and how you incorporate those into your portfolio. I'm not saying you have to be as aggressive as someone like me that has a significant percentage of my liquid holdings in Bitcoin, but if you have, I would say, liquid net worth north of say $50,000, and you don't have at least 10 to 20% of it in Bitcoin, you're really not thinking it through. The beauty of it is nobody can control your Bitcoin if you self-custody other than you. No government, not the IRS, not the government, nobody. It's yours to control, and there's no other mechanism to do that. You want to send even $100,000 between bank accounts between here and Europe, that's going to be a huge hassle. You want to make a $100,000 investment in a company in the U.S. Might be more challenging than you think. You want to do that with Bitcoin, you can send $100,000 or $100 million in Bitcoin anywhere in the world in 10 minutes for a few dollars. There's no other way in the world to do that. So really, really think about having at least some of your liquid net worth safely stored in a self-custody wallet. Make sure you've got succession planning so that if something were to happen to you, that someone's able to recover that crypto. Make sure you leave clear instructions. But trust me, this is something you need to think about. All right, everybody. Thank you, and see you next week. Coffee with Podge.